Ready when you are, yep. I remember her.
Sad.
Okay.
Good morning. Being 9 a.m., I'll call to order the McHenry County Board Committee of the Whole meeting of July 13th, 2023. And Mr. Sager will lead us in the pledge today.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hey, Kathy, could you call the roll, please?
Pamela Altoff.
Mike?
Pamela Altoff.
My screen's not working.
Carolyn Campbell. Here. Joseph Gottemauer.
Terry Greeno. Here. Eric Hendricks. Carl Kaminsky.
Present.
James Kearns. Here. Matthew Kunkel. Teresa Meshes. Here. Lou Ness. Here. John Reinhardt. Here. Brian Sager.
Here.
Michael Shorten.
Here.
Michael Scala. Larry Smith.
Here.
Gloria Van Hoff.
She's online.
Tracy Von Bergen.
Here.
Kelly Wegner.
Here.
Chairman Bueller.
Here. We have a quorum. I will entertain a motion to allow Ms. Van Hoff and Ms. Altoff to attend remotely. Ms. Ness makes the motion, seconded by Ms. Meshes. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion carries. Move on to my comments. Good morning. I hope you all had a wonderful Independence Day holiday with your family and friends. And today I'll start with some exciting news. As many of you have already heard, Governor Pritzker announced last week that the state will be partnering with Metra to restore rail service between Chicago and Rockford, with a train stop in Huntley finally coming to fruition. The $275 million project will be funded through the Rebuild Illinois Capital Program and aims to support 2 daily round trips by the end of 2027. This is huge. This is great for Huntley and all of McHenry County, and it's great for Rockford, and it's great for Boone and Winnebago counties, both of which partner with us in the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy Plan to help further develop our regional economy. County Administration and County Metro Board Representative Ken Kaler will keep us updated as this project moves forward. Also on the subject of mass transit, County Administration is continuing to watch as the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning gets close to revealing a plan for how the Regional Transportation Authority can address predicted financial shortfalls starting in 2026. Last Friday, July 7th, and again yesterday, July 12th, County Administrator Pete Austin convened a meeting with the administrators of our other 4 collar counties, as well as representatives from their respective transportation and planning offices, to discuss what the collar counties would like to see in CMAP's plan. After my remarks, Carolyn Schofield, our representative on the CMAP board, and Scott Hennings, our Assistant Director of Transportation, will address the county board on CMAP's role and ideas in preparing options for the future of regional mass transit. On Monday, July 3rd, I had the pleasure of attending as Chief Judge Michael Chamil swore in Diana Hartman to a full term as our Regional Superintendent of Schools. Diana's done an outstanding job reforming the office and moving it forward, and now she will continue to excel in this role. Days later, Diana announced that the Pearson View Testing Lab in the ROE's new office in McHenry is now open for business, giving county residents a local site to take high school equivalency exams, as well as more than 200 professional certification and licensing exams. Thank you and congratulations to Diane and her staff for seeing this project through to completion. And just a brief note, the very first day they opened up, they already had applications for people to take their testing, so it's already being utilized. Last Friday, July 7th, Judge Chamil also swore in new Associate Judge Cynthia Lamb. With Judge Lamb now on the bench, the 22nd Judicial Circuit has more women judges than at any time in history. Congratulations to Valley High Nursing and Rehab for winning the Silver Quality Award from the American Healthcare Association and the National Center for Assisted Living. Valley High was one of only 63 nursing homes nationwide and only one of 4 in Illinois to be awarded this honor in 2023. Our nursing home won the bronze medal in 2016 and has worked tirelessly since, including through the COVID-19 pandemic and the tremendous challenges it presented to assisted living facilities to earn the silver medal. Thank you to Tom Anarella, Assistant Administrator Tara Pulte, and all of Valley High's talented staff for this achievement. And finally this morning, last night our EMA was tracking the storms that came through the county. There were reports of some roof and ancillary structure damages. Dave Christensen is out this morning to further assess the damages, and thank goodness there have been no reports of injuries. And that's all I have for today. Do any members have comments this morning? Mr. Kaminsky.
I'd like to give a shout out to our outstanding transportation department, from informing people that we're going to be reconstructing the bridge in Johnsburg, to routing the people around, to demolishing that bridge and the reconstruction. The best thing of it all is it's coming in ahead of schedule. Outstanding. Way to go, guys. Thank you. You're going to make the people of Johnsburg and the surrounding communities very happy that they're going to be able to go and spend their money and trade and get the goods they've needed while that bridge has been under construction. Again, job outstanding. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kaminsky. Ms. Von Bergen.
Thank you. At yesterday's CDHG meeting, we had updates from 3 groups that we'd previously given money to, from the Environmental Defenders and the Food Shed Co-op. Peter Waldman indicated that the commission, they're going to host a groundbreaking celebration at 4 o'clock on Tuesday, July 18th. And because of the CDBG grant, the over 1,700 owners and the USDA, the project is able to get underway. We also had a presentation from Richard Koning from the Housing Opportunity Development Corporation. That's the project in McHenry. And he presented that because of the local investments from ARPA and Home ARP funding, the HDOC is able to secure tax credits for the Taylor Place Workforce Housing Project. The housing project is expected to commence in the springtime. After the weather breaks, the project will provide 50 new units of rental housing in downtown McHenry, all of which will be at 30, 50, and 80% of the area median income. It also incorporates historic preservation of an existing structure that will be used from the community room for the property. So that's exciting news with things that, we were able to move forward, and Mr. Koning indicated that without our funding, they would not have been able to secure the tax credits from the state. So, great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further member comments, we'll move on to public comment. Please be advised that each person wishing to speak will have 3 minutes to speak, at which time the light in front of me, the red light, will come on in front of me. And if you're not finished with your comments, I'd ask you to summarize. First person to speak will be Steve Hindy. Morning.
My name is Steve Hindy. I live in Elburn, Illinois. This morning I want to inform you of the gross abuse of horses and steers at Mexican-style rodeos occurring in numerous counties, including McHenry County. In one event, a steer is forced to run alongside a wall. A contestant rides up alongside him, reaches down, grabs his tail, and pulls him around, making him crash to the ground. Steers can't run sideways or backwards any better than we do, so what happens is very cruel and dangerous to them. My organization, Showing Animals Respect and Kindness, has used drones to video document animals being abused in clear violation of state humane laws at each and every one of those events, including an event in Marengo on June 3rd of this year. Steers are constantly jabbed with powerful electric prods that are banned in American-style rodeos. Steers are run as many as 15 to 20 times in a performance, as opposed to American rodeos which would tend to run an animal once, maybe twice if they have a shortage. Injured steers are left to suffer without veterinary care whatsoever. The nature of the injuries range from laming and broken legs to painful skull damage and broken backs. Some steers are degloved, meaning the outside sheath of their tails are literally ripped off the underlying muscle. This is extremely painful and creates a serious risk of infection. Contestants beat their own horses, slapping them in the face, fists to the head, whippings, including whipping them in the face. If you haven't seen the video documentation, it may be difficult for you to believe that such abuse goes on in Illinois, but it does, including here. We've worked in Boone County for the past season, but now we're in McHenry, Will, and Ogle counties, and there will be more. I hope this board will look at this issue and do the right thing. All of these abuses, all of them, violate the Illinois Humane Care for Animals Act. They are illegal. The publicizing of the very disturbing images we are gathering at these events are damaging the reputation of our state. We don't want to see Illinois' reputation damaged, but we are determined that this clear and illegal animal abuse will not stand. I'm available to meet with you and show you the documentation we've gathered and continue to gather. My phone number is 630-640-1889. Please feel free to contact me at your convenience. Thank you.
Thank you. Next will be Dawn Marie Mueller.
Good morning, Chairman Bueller. It's good to see you. Good morning to all the members of the board. Good to see you all too. And to the staff, thank you for preparing this meeting, and I look forward to speaking with many of you and to the public, of course. For those who don't remember me, my name is Dawn Marie Mueller, locally known as Patriot Dawn. At this time, I have a difficult opportunity to state a residence. So I'll just state a post office box, P.O. Box 727, Lake Forest, Illinois 60045. I can be reached at 779-713-3893. My email address is Dawn, D-A-W-N, M as in Mary, M as in Mary, at M as in Mary, C as in Charles.net. On Twitter, if you'd like to learn about me, you may go to @MagnetoDawn, MagnetoDawn. For those who don't know me, since there are a number of new faces on the board, my background is in space physics and aerospace engineering. I did an NIU physics degree, worked at Fermilab in high energy physics for several years, then went on to work on a spacecraft mission for NASA at Jet Propulsion Laboratory and the University of Iowa Department of Physics and Astronomy. The reason I'm here today is that some time ago, as many know, I was very severely injured in an auto crash and had head, neck, shoulder, and spine injuries, and became quadriplegic and had a very major cervical spine surgery in 2015, from which I have been trying to recover in McHenry County. Unfortunately, despite 6.5 years in McHenry County, I've not been rehabilitated and gotten back to work, and I think I could discuss needs to improve, methods to rehabilitate and care for persons who have suffered catastrophic injuries. I will, at this time, set aside some of the reasons why I'm actually here today. I hope to work with some of the staff and Chairman Bueller, and I will speak at the next council meeting. Thank you for being here, and enjoy the rest of the summer.
Thank you. Katie Rivard.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board and staff. My name is Katie Rivard. I'm the Assistant City Planner for the City of Crystal Lake. Here on behalf of the city to speak in regards to the solar farm proposal at Ridgefield Road. The mayor and city council has directed staff to seek 3 additional conditions of approval. Number 1 being the most important, we understand that the county stormwater ordinance includes the city's watershed ordinance for this property, but we hope that you will consider the requirement for inspection manholes are installed to monitor the drain tiles that run through the property, which feed into Crystal Lake. And the other 2 conditions, I believe you've received the letter, so I won't read them, but our city of Crystal Lake requirements for solar farms. The next important one just being that we just want to ensure that fire apparatus can access the site. So maybe consider looking into an alternative such as permeable pavers if the site, if the access does not want to be, if the city board does not want to see that being paved. So happy to answer any questions you might have. Otherwise, thank you for your time.
Will you be around to answer questions later?
Sure.
Next will be Mary Donner.
Morning, Chairman,
Morning.
board members, staff. Love you all. This is great. My name's Mary Donner. I live at 2536 Verdi Street in Woodstock. I am part of a wonderful group of 11 people who are working on the Regional Plan Commission for the 2050 plan. We've had a long year and a half, but we're finally all smiling. We all are excited. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty, and we're going to start having fun doing what we need to do so that you can have what you have, particularly for Carolyn Campbell, who has been part of this program and the liaison. She has helped us up considerably from where we are in a small area to what's going on in the county now, because not everybody knows. We are doing presentations that anybody can see that are streamed when we have meetings every month. And this year, start out a little back story. It is the 75th anniversary for the McHenry County Fair. So it should be a big deal this year. And we have procured a booth. So we will be showing off everything that we can do. We have interactive things like jars that you can put corn in and see what it is you like, what it is that's going on from all the different chapters that we've been working on. And we also have some tchotchkes to send out and people who can join us with their items to be in our booth so that everybody gets a chance to show off and shine. It's a great time. We even have our commission members are going to be manning the booth. We'll take any help that we can get. It's only 2 hours at a time, and it's from the 1st until the 6th. It's going to be great. That's about it. I like my jars. They're going to be the most fun. It's going to be good for kids. It's going to be good for adults. It's very interactive, the way we're going to set it. We have pins where you can put where you live. We have maps that they can see what's going on. We have places that they can, on your gifts for today, there is a QR code so they can take the survey or see whatever else is going on. I think we're doing very well, and I just wanted to make this a soft start. We're doing well. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Carolyn Schofield.
Good morning. I'm Carolyn Schofield. I live at 1580 West Crandon Court in Crystal Lake. And I thought since I'm here to present later, I take the opportunity to, on behalf of the McHenry County Youth Sports Association, to invite you all to come out to some games that will be occurring over the next 2 weeks. I've been part of MCYSA for about a decade and have been arranging their opening ceremonies and singers this year. So tomorrow night is the opening night. at 7 p.m. in Crystal Lake at Lippold Field. We will have there's a YouTuber that's going to be there. He does baseball comedy, so there's usually fireworks that go off. And then Sunday there will be a evening game as well with a singer for the national anthem. But wanted to also focus on the second part of that tournament starts next week, July 20th. Your very own Chairman Bueller, right? That's the date you're throwing out. We'll be throwing out the first pitch. And on the 22nd, we're actually trying to get the county more involved because this is really a community event. We have over 50 teams from 4 different countries that will be participating in the tournament this year. And on the 22nd at 9 a.m. in Woodstock, we will kick off Woodstock Day for the first ever time. We're going to have an opening ceremonies in Woodstock, and Woodstock Willie, I believe, will be there. We'll have, I don't know all the details on it, but that will be the focus on Woodstock at Emerson Park. Dreamfield, I think is the name of it. I'm looking at Brian, and yes. And then in that evening, we have Armed Forces Night, which will be back in Crystal Lake at Lippold Field, at the Mickey Sun Field at Lippold Park at 7 p.m. And there will be Joe Stevenson from the Northwest Herald will be playing taps on the trumpet. We'll have all the branches of the military there representing. We'll have the Color Guard, the Lions Club with their big flag will be there. So, and prior to that at 5:30 is a first responder softball exhibition game at those fields as well. So really it's a great community event. I would encourage you all to, if you get the chance to come out and join us, especially that Armed Forces Night, to really thank everyone for their service to this country. So please, I hope to see you there. Thanks.
Thank you. You might as well just stay up here. You're up next. Okay, so we'll move on to reports and presentations. Today we have the CMAP Plan of Action for Regional Transit presented by Carolyn Schofield and Scott Hennings.
All right, well, I guess I don't have to officially introduce myself, my name, but I am Carolyn Schofield, and this time I'm now here on behalf as the McHenry County representative on the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning Board. I am also on the executive committee for CMAP, as I am one of the vice chairs for CMAP. And with me today, and the master of the presentation here, and I want to give Scott a big thank you for putting this together. So Scott Hennings, he not only is part of the transportation department here in McHenry County, but he is on the CMAP Transportation Committee. And I just want to let you know that Scott and I work together often. He typically sees the issues that we're going to be seeing at the board member prior and has the working knowledge, so he'll let me know if something's coming up, and vice versa if I have any questions for him or need any technical background. We work together on CMAP in understanding the issues and how McHenry County would like to see transportation within this region. And then we also will consult with Chairman Bueller if there are issues that arise that we feel McHenry County really needs to give input on. So this is one of those cases. The plan of action for regional transit was actually developed, through legislation by the last General Assembly, and it became Public Act 102-1028, and it tasked CMAP with putting together a steering committee to develop a plan for long-term fiscal viability of our regional transit system, and then present a report back to the General Assembly by January 1st of 2024. And in that legislation, which I believe you all have in front of you, it does outline the specific areas that CMAP is to address, which is the recovery ratio, sales tax formulation and distributions, governance structure, regional fare systems, and other changes or recommendations that they may have to the statutes or authority within the service boards, and then policy rules and ultimately funding as well. So before we talk about where we're at today, we really want to know how did we get to this point to begin with and why this legislation was developed to start with. So I will let Scott take that over.
So a quick overview of regional transit operations in Chicagoland. Everybody knows the service board, CTA, Metra, PACE, but then there's also PACE ADA, which is separate. And the RTA oversees all 4 of these entities, provides oversight for the agencies. What you can see on this slide is not only the ridership in 2019, which totaled roughly 562 million trips in 2019. But also the operating costs. That's the annual operating cost just to keep the trains and the buses running. In 2019 was roughly $3 billion and has since grown to about $3.5 billion per year. And you can see how that's broken out between the three service boards as well as the RTA. Unlike other peer systems around the country, what makes the RTA a little bit unique is that the state of Illinois requires the RTA to bring in roughly 50% of that operating cost in revenue, passenger fares. So what that means is the riders are expected to pay half of that operating cost by state statute. That is very unique. Other metropolitan areas, they may have a requirement to meet a certain percentage, but nobody is as high as the Chicagoland region at 50%. The remainder of the 50% is covered by taxes, usually primarily the RTA sales tax, which is locally generated sales tax revenue, with also some state match associated with that as well. So obviously the COVID-19 pandemic resulted in a dramatic decline in ridership, and with it, passenger revenue fare across all modes, not just on the CTA, but also on Metro and PACE. And while ridership has slowly recovered over the last few years, it will take many, many years, many decades probably, to reach back to where we were pre-pandemic in 2019. And again, the Chicago region is not unique in this. Every transit agency across the country, across the world, is dealing with a similar situation, a similar story. However, Northeast Illinois is kind of alone in the fact that we have a larger operating funding problem because of the fact that we rely so heavily on heavy rail and commuter rail, which has suffered more than bus service has. So in other parts of the country that don't really have a rail system, their ridership has recovered significantly since 2019. McHenry County, or the RTA region, has not seen this as the same recovery just due to our heavily reliance on rail. So that brings us to why we're here today. So everybody's kind of heard of the transit fiscal cliff that's coming. The drop in fare revenue that accompanied the pandemic put the region's transit system at risk of collapse. Thankfully, federal COVID relief funding for transit operations was provided in 2021 and 2020 under two administrations. These federal funds gave the RTA roughly $3.5 billion for transit operations, which is unique. The federal government got out of funding transit operations many decades ago, and primarily the federal government's most known for funding capital. But because everybody understood this was a unique situation, the federal government stepped in to fund transit operations in 2020. In December of 2021, the Illinois General Assembly also granted the RTA temporary relief from the 50% fare box recovery ratio. So what that meant was that the RTA was no longer held to that 50% standard, at least temporarily, and it was just extended, I think, for another 2 years, I believe, as part of the most recent session. Regional sales taxes and federal relief money will keep the region's trains and buses running into 2026. But that is when our system is predicted to hit a fiscal cliff of roughly $730 million per year, which will grow over time. If the current funding model, which is heavily reliant on fares, is not changed and additional funding is not secured, transit agencies will be forced to make large cuts to service and raise fares, which will have a kind of a death spiral effect because more people will choose not to ride the buses and the trains, which will then put more pressure on the system to raise fares even more. The budgetary gap of $730 million is the main problem this PART plan is really trying to solve. And as a point of clarification, again, the $730 million is in 2026, and that's just to maintain the system we have today. Make no improvements whatsoever to the level of service that's being provided. That's just to get us to where we are today currently. I'll hand it back over to Carolyn for the rest.
Not really, just the, excuse me. So now that we know why we're here, then the steering committee that was put together by CMAP, and it included, I think there's like 27 different people on there covering areas of the business sector, environmental, workforce, different county and municipalities, civic organizations. They got together and they realized this was a big ask, actually, that the state had. So they broke it down into 3 different parts in order to figure out how they were going to proceed with the process. First, asking, what is the system that we want? And they have gone out to different stakeholders and found out throughout the region what people want to see in a transportation system moving forward in the future. And then how do we pay for that system? How does funding need to look? What do we need to add in the future? Or how do we need to restructure things? And then finally, once we know what we want and how we pay for it, how do we implement it? And what is that governance and funding structure going to look like? So we'll cover those more in detail as to where we're at today. And that will be Scott.
So first on the system we want, early in this process, both with the RTA strategic plan that they completed earlier this year, as well as the CMAP part plan, there was an early recognition that the system we have today is not good enough, that people want to see improvements to the system. Nobody's happy with the status quo currently today. So CMAP broke out what these system improvements could look like into these 7 categories you see on the screen. Better buses, fare integration, safety and security, system accessibility, service frequency, regional rail, as well as TOD or transit supportive land use development. And again, any of these, any type of improvements is going to increase that budgetary gap of 730 to potentially $1 billion or beyond if we're implementing any one of these options. And I know, just having sat or having been a part of county transportation committees, I know there's a frustration sometimes with the current level of PACE service that's being provided today, both in terms of people wanting additional fixed routes, people wanting the fixed routes that do exist to operate more hours during the day, as well as the lack of technology on our current MC Ride program. So I think there's a general consensus that what we have today is not good enough. So the next section Carolyn mentioned is how to pay for it. The CMAP used as a starting point the work the RTA accomplished in their strategic plan, Transit is the Answer. Not only did they look at new revenue options, new taxes, but they also looked at system-generated revenue, like fare increases, savings, cost savings, in terms of things like that, as well as structural changes to the RTA, to the service boards that might save money in the long run. So what I'm showing here are the top 11 revenue options that the RTA put together as part of their strategic plan. Now these run the gamut between a sales tax increase that we have today, just increasing the rate, all the way to user type fees like motor fuel tax increases, a vehicle miles traveled fee, and everything else. The RTA actually evaluated 27 revenue options, and these were the top 11 that came to light in terms of raising the most revenue, political feasibility to actually get implemented, as well as the timing that it would take to get implemented. And as you can see, the RTA sales tax increasing that rate, 0.25%, would raise the most revenue and can be done very, very quickly because there's already an existing tax that's applied today. Increasing the MFT, implementing a congestion pricing system, or increasing the tollway tolls, or implementing a VMT tax, they all raise less revenue, but score higher in their ability to incentivize the use of public transit in the future. So that's important too. I mean, a lot of these revenue options could actually push more people to want to use transit, which would then be healthy for the system in the long term. CMAP's part report that we're talking about today will build off of the work the RTA did in Transit is the Answer, but also may include additional revenue options that aren't on this list. So this is just the list the RTA put together. We want to take questions now.
I just have a quick one. I can't read. What does the orange and the blue stand for?
So the orange...
Mike.
Yeah.
I can't read, sorry. What does the orange and the blue stand for in the lines up there?
So the orange bars, that's the low revenue estimate. If that tax were to be applied, that's the low estimate of revenue that would be expected. The blue is the high estimate of revenue that could be expected with that tax increase. So again, it's a range. We don't know based on economic factors how much we will generate by each of these, but the RTA provided a range.
Thank you.
I'm going to turn it back over to Carolyn here.
And now that we know the system we want theoretically in the system and how we're going to pay for it. We now have to figure out how do we implement that. So this is the last piece of what CMAP will be looking at and presenting in their final report. And in particular, looking at how do we allocate those funds that they decided that they want to either implement or increase. And then the system of governance. Right now we have 3 different service boards serving under one agency, and right there, we actually see it over on the right-hand side. You can see, and this is probably one of the stickiest pieces of this report, in my opinion, because this is where it gets the most political. If you look at the appointments on the left-hand side are the different counties and the city of Chicago and the governor appointments and how many they have on the different boards. So any sort of restructure may affect that. And then on the previous one, it was the fare box recovery ratio is the other area that they need to look at in the governance. But now that we're on this one, on how do we implement it, there were several options that were looked at. We could keep things the same as they are, and looking to other areas throughout the country, there are many transit organizations throughout the country. However, we're unique in the sense that we're really decentralized. And so looking at those as examples, if we kept the status quo, we would still be decentralized. If we minimize the role of the RTA, that would actually put more authority on those individual service organizations. Or we could keep the structure the same and allow a little more authority to the RTA as far as those funding allocations. Right now, they're just overseeing the budget of the service organizations, similar to how you operate with different boards underneath you. You can approve or not approve those funding or their budgets rather than having a say in actual funding. However, those 3 options were really found to be not as effective as they want to be as far as being able to implement and fund appropriately. So they've kind of been taken off the list, and they're focusing more on strengthening the RTA and keeping the individual service organizations, or integrating the service boards into one larger agency and allowing that control into a larger board, be it the RTA or some other oversight board that would have full control over the individual agencies, sort of like little subcommittees underneath that. Let me see if I got to use my cheat sheet now. Oh yeah, so those are the bottom 2 areas. And now that we kind of know what we want and how to implement it, where are we today? So we're kind of in that middle process right there in the July, September. Like I said before, this was a really big ask by the General Assembly to have all this information researched, get 27 people together to agree on it, present it to the CMAP board and the MPO. We'll be seeing the draft report at our September meeting, and then in October we have our annual joint meeting where the final report will be presented to the CMAP board and the policy committee and to be voted on, and then there'll be a couple months to be able to really put that report together and for the final presentation to the General Assembly, and by that January 1st, 2024 date. And from what we've heard, we don't know a whole lot of exactly what's going to be in there. And so we don't have really an ask from you guys today. This is an informational, just to get it out there in case you hear anything about the PART program. You'll know their status today. CMAP will be putting out white papers in the near future to look at this information. And then the plan is to really present it in sort of a menu to the General Assembly, and picking and choosing, maybe, they describe it as like an a la carte, like if you want to see, how do you want to see your system, and then you can pick and choose from the options on how you want to see it, and then based on what you pick and choose, how you'll fund it, and then you can kind of move it around, and depending on what is best for the region and what really can be realistically funded throughout the region, and then that final implementation of, how do we implement that and the governance of it. So that's really, and again, I want to thank Scott for doing all the work on this, and I really appreciate his help. So we're happy to take questions if you have any.
Any questions from the board? Ms. Wagner?
Thank you. That draft plan that you said is going to be out September 13th, is that something that we will get a copy of?
It's just, I mean, it's gonna be at our board meeting. It will be presented to the CMAP board and the MPO. We have 2 joint meetings together, so that will be part of their agenda. That is public information that can be seen on CMAPs. I mean, if you want, I can get it to Pete and he can distribute it, so, yeah.
That would be great. And then you're voting on that in the October meeting, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Right, and if I could just add, all of this is really still kind of in flux. As I mentioned in my comments earlier today, Peter and staff are meeting with other county organizations to actually see how we're going to implement these ideas and what we need, especially as far as the collar counties as are asked to make sure that this goes relatively smoothly and come up with what's best for us. And other conversations that we've had amongst the county board chairs is, if we're looking at this big fiscal cliff, what are we doing as far as reform? And when do we implement that? Obviously this is coming up on us in 2026, so you can't necessarily do reform before you get these financial aspects in order as well. So it'll probably be something in parallel with the decisions that are made on the revenue side, but structural reform is going to be a very important part of all of this to try to find efficiencies where we can.
Yeah, and if I can add, in particular, a lot of this is going to fall on the General Assembly as far as the funding and the reform. Really, my role is to make sure that McHenry County's voice is being heard in the process. And so we've been working closely together, all 3 of us, and, I welcome, if you have any comments to bring forward, but just make sure that we get the vote that we want on this moving forward and that they hear what system we want and the funding options that are acceptable to McHenry County. And then the General Assembly really is the one that's going to have to make those ultimate decisions as far as funding and structure, and because it will involve legislative changes. Each service organization is put forth through legislation, so there will need to be changes that are brought forth in that process. So CMAP's going to present it, but even with a final plan that they present, it's not going to be the final decision. That's going to lie with the General Assembly.
Ms. Ness?
So you actually partially answered one of my questions. What does MPO stand for?
I'm sorry, it's the Metropolitan, right, it's Metropolitan Policy Organization. And so, I failed to mention that. So the CMAP board are those that are appointed by, like I'm appointed by the chairman and the mayor's caucus and you as a whole. And then, so each collar county has a representative, and then there's 5 from Cook and 5 from the city of Chicago. And then the MPO is even the next level. They're actually the chairman of the boards, are those representative, and the service organizations, the heads of their service organizations are there. It's chaired by the secretary of IDOT. So they actually make the policies, so they're more the federal level, and then the CMAP board is more. Okay, they're the federal requirement. So we found out in the past, they actually have a little authority over the CMAP board, but we try to work together and we try to agree. So
that was my, what I was curious about is how the balance of representation for smaller counties and the 5 from Chicago and the 5 from Cook, and, how does that really work well in representing like McHenry County? That was my curiosity.
I think we've been fortunate. I do think we've been fortunate. I mean, I've been fortunate as far as the CMAP role in that I vice chair it now. So I think, it does at least help us, have a voice.
Yeah.
I think it depends. I mean, in the collar counties, we do work together. We had some concerns at our last board meeting, and the collar counties do meet with one another, and, we kind of go together as a group. And so it's split, third, and really one of the biggest things that was incorporated into the legislation is because of that split, we actually have a supermajority required on every vote that we take.
Okay, great.
So there's not one.
Chairman Bueller, would this be seen as one of our legislative issues in the future that we would want to collaboratively put something together and make sure we move it forward?
Well, ultimately, yes, because it's
Okay.
going to be legislative in nature.
Okay,
I mean, as far as collaboration, I mean, we are and will continue to meet with the other Collar counties to decide what it is we need as a region, which will ultimately benefit McHenry County as well. So us collectively working together really kind of helps balance that mix out on the boards.
If I may.
Go ahead, Scott.
In addition to the state legislative program, I think this should be part of your federal legislative program as well. I mean, like I said before, every transit agency across the whole country is dealing with this same issue. So therefore, in my mind, there might be a federal role to play to help these transit agencies out more long-term than what they've done already.
Right, and we have these funding options that you saw up on the screen earlier are all provided within the state. And we have been talking to our federal representatives about the need for potentially additional funding from the federal government, and they all seem pretty open to that, but we're not showing that on here because we have no idea what that might even look like. Okay. Ms. Greeno.
On the slide, sorry, regarding the funding options, on the column that showed the years, 2 to 5, and most of them were 2, I could not read what is at the top of that column, what exactly that means.
Oh, no, sorry. So if you're referring to this column right here.
Yes.
It's projected range of implementation. So I think it's just the years it would take to actually fully implement that revenue source.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and you guys are going to forward this presentation to us?
I can do that right after the meeting, yes.
Pretty small print.
Apologies.
I got it right in front of me and I can't read it.
And I will say, all of these charts and everything I pulled for this presentation were right off of CMAP's Part Plan website. So that's accessible to the public. You can go on there right now and check out. You have to dig for it, but everything is on there right now.
Search.
Yes.
If you search part, it will come up. I had to do that.
Mr. Shorten.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was having trouble reading too, so I'll take a look at the copies. And I have a couple other questions, but I'll reach out to you directly to talk through those. Thank you.
Dr. Sagar.
I know that we've all heard quite a bit about the fiscal cliff that's coming up, and obviously CMAP is focused upon that. But I also think it's important that we all understand that CMAP is focused not just on that element, but in the broader perspective of what it is that we truly want in the future and how we're going to get there. And so that's really important, not just to think about this in terms of the fiscal cliff, which is imminent, there's no question about it, and of great concern, but at the same time, we're doing what we need to do most appropriately for long-term visioning and planning. And so I think the effort is noble, and it's been incredibly well crafted and executed. So I want to thank Carolyn and Scott and others for their significant efforts in that, as well as the chairman who has worked on a regional basis of that. The second thing I want to say is that in general, I think that is representative of the strong collaboration which is occurring across the board among all service agency boards, the RTA, CMAP, et cetera. This is a strong collaborative effort to work to address our current and future needs. So that collaboration is incredibly important, and I look forward to that continuing in a very positive manner. I think we have to accept the fact that collaboration, because of the nature of the suburbs working together and collaboratively with the Cook County area and Chicago, has not always been as positive as what it is today. And so I think that we need to uphold that. And the last thing I want to say is that we do need to understand that we all operate within a political world. And we can talk about the wants, and we can talk about the costs, and we can talk about the implementation, but it is within a strong political environment in which we operate. And so, as Carolyn so appropriately said, it's going to be up to the legislature to ultimately wrestle with this and to make some determinations. But it's most important that we have the opportunity to input into this. And so I want to encourage everyone to be knowledgeable about the issues, and certainly to speak your mind and voice as we continue to move forward over the next year to address this. Thank you.
And if I could add to that, I appreciate those comments because first, you know firsthand with the RTA that the issue that's before us, but the fact that each agency has actually been working together for the better of the entire region, I will stress that point. And I have encouraged CMAP to continue down that path and present facts and figures in the information for people to make their own decisions before that political aspect does get involved with it, because that is the most important part, is the region working together as a whole for the betterment of everyone within that region. And you're right that the General Assembly has that, as I mentioned, has that decision, but I'd like to make it very challenging for them to make any decision but which one we feel is the right one. So I've stressed that with CMAP to go ahead and, really present those facts and their thoughts and the process behind it. So it will be there for everyone to make that right decision for the best of the region. Thanks.
Ms. Altoff?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just want to reassure the full board that County Administrator Austin did make a brief presentation and pull the Law and Government Committee into the loop. So it is going to be part of our future agenda and the future of our legislative efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hendricks?
Thanks. What's the main
Mike,
drive?
pull your mic.
What's the main driver of the operating costs, like that 3 billion operating cost to 3.5?
Well, again, I'm not the expert. I can try to summarize as best I can. So if you take a look at the operating costs jumping from 3 million to 3.5 million over 4 years, primarily that's due to labor costs. I mean, that's really what keeps the trains and buses running, is primarily the labor costs associated with that. If you want a more specific answer, I'd have to just defer you to the RTA or to the service boards themselves.
Okay. And then
Can I add to that first real quick? So one of the challenges too that has occurred is when you're asking about the costs, it's not so easy as just to say, just cut costs. These are systems that are in existence. These are systems that people have gotten used to, and you can't just remove them. You're still going to have the tracks, you're still going to have the buses and the trains, and you can't just, I think that's one of the biggest challenges. It's not just operating, but it's also stuff, it's also the components that previously exist and can't just go away.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And then do we know what the county portion of that $700 to $1 billion tax increase would be?
We don't know that.
Okay.
That's all being worked out right now as part of this plan. I will say, currently, in 2023, our residents are generating roughly $40 million per year in RTA sales tax for the RTA and the service boards. So that's the 0.75% sales tax that is on everything you buy, whether it's food or anything else. And so that 40 million per year is what's there today. If you're looking at increasing that by 0.25%, for example, let's just throw that out there, you're talking about another 15 million a year, roughly, is what that would generate from our residents alone here, everything that was purchased in McHenry County. So just to give you an order of magnitude, sort of what you're talking about here.
Okay. And then final question, sorry. Do we know, is ridership use increasing or decreasing?
Well, across all service boards, it's increasing, but again, it's from a lower baseline than it was previously, not just 4 years ago. I can speak primarily to our dial-a ride program, the MC Ride program. We're almost back to where we were pre-pandemic. I think this year we're on track to hit over 99,000 trips this year, and we had about 105 in 2019. So we're getting back up there, and I think our low in 2020 we were at something like 55,000 trips. So we've grown substantially over the last couple of years, and that's true for all the bus type services. When you're talking about rail, things are a little bit more gloomy as far as the ridership recovery, but as I said before, ridership it's more than half of what it was. It's about half of what it was in 2019, currently still today.
Okay, thank you.
To that point, CMAP does have some information on their site. I would encourage you all, if you get a chance to go to CMAP, I think it's like .illinois CMAP.gov or something like that. But just Google CMAP. And it does have reports on there as far as the recovery. And as Scott mentioned, the rail in particular is slower to recover and anticipated to really never recover to the rates that they were before. And a lot of that has to do with the working from home and how that's just a change we're going to have to accept moving forward. So there are reports within the CMAP website that does outline those percentages and where we're looking at, and maybe some helpful information for you as well.
Right, and that is cmap.illinois spelled out .gov.
Okay, .gov, thank you.
Ms. Wegner?
Thank you. Could you guys go back to the slide that showed the different revenue sources? Thank you. All right, so I noticed the third one down is the congestion pricing. I was reading something the other day, and that would be, I assume would be a little something in their car, like we have the iPass, and you would charge somebody extra money if they're driving through the city at prime hours. Is that right?
Well, congestion pricing is a term that's thrown out a lot, but it means very different things to different people. So one thing you just kind of alluded to was what's often referred to as cordon pricing, meaning I know New York City just implemented this, where if you enter Manhattan, you pay a much higher surcharge to get downtown during peak hours. That is a form of congestion pricing, but congestion pricing in the planning world also includes things like variable tollway pricing, variable tolls based on time of day. So if you're traveling during peak hours, your toll might be 3 times what it is in the middle of the night when nobody is using the tollway. So these are things that you could manage congestion and actually increase people's travel speed while raising revenue at the same time to help fund potentially our transit system here in Northeast Illinois.
And has there been a study, is it effective to reduce congestion? I know this is kind of a relatively new thing, so I don't know if there have been other cities that you can look at to see that it's reduced.
It has. I mean, this is being implemented around the world a lot more than it is here in the United States, but I will say major metro areas that have done congestion pricing have seen success reducing congestion during peak hours where they used to experience it. Now it does not exist, and they're able to raise quite a bit of revenue doing that to help fund buses and trains and everything else. And the roadway that people are driving on too. I mean, a lot of other areas, they use tolls for not just the roadway itself, but for all transportation modes.
Okay. And that money then would go to CMAP and RTA?
I think that's all being thrown
Not
around.
just the city?
Yeah, I think this is all being determined as part of this PART plan. It's CMAP, again, CMAP doesn't run the trains and buses. They're the planning agency that does the planning for the region. It's the RTA and the service boards that are in charge of actually operating the transit systems. So again, these are options that the RTA put forward to potentially help fill that fiscal cliff of $730 million. But it's to be clear, I mean, none of these get us there the whole way. It's a combination of these that's going to be necessary to get even close to the $700 million a year.
Okay, thank you.
And none of these funding options go to CMAP.
Right? No,
It's all
we don't.
for the transit system.
We just distribute all the money.
Correct.
And just to let you know, really all of these options have been talked about over the last decade. I mean, none of these are new ideas. We have always known that infrastructure and the viability within our region as a whole has been a challenge. So we have, I sat on transportation funding years ago even, and these are the same options that came up at that time. And as Scott mentioned, it's going to most likely be a combination of many of these and not just one in particular.
As well as fare increases. I mean, if you increase fares, that $730 million starts to come down slightly, right, depending on your level of fare increase. And then, operational cost savings that the transit agencies are able to accomplish would further bring that down. So it's going to be a combination of everything that's necessary as part of this.
Mr. Sager?
I appreciate the questions that colleague Hendricks brought up, and I think it's kind of important that we take that one step farther and understand as a board and as a county that currently right now McHenry County is a net contributor to the system, and we are a net contributor via our tax structure. And not that I think that that's inappropriate, but the thing that I think that we need to continually strive for is increased service to our county as a result of the fact that we are contributing at a very high level. Right now, we have a couple of great opportunities which have just been commented upon by the chairman in the recent announcement with regards to the Metro and the southerly extension to the Rockford area via Huntley. And I think that that's a great opportunity for increased services. Another opportunity comes with the Woodstock Rail Yard and moving that rail from parking function from Crystal Lake out to northwest of Woodstock, which would increase service in the Woodstock and greater region. So those are the types of things that we continually have to forward in terms of all of the various agencies and the legislature to make them and help them to understand the importance of economic growth and development in McHenry County as we continue to be a net donor or contributor to the system. We need to continue to grow as well. So it's a fine balance that we have to work on in that regard. Thank you.
Ms. Ness?
So really, in some ways, how we conceptualize transportation is we don't really know everything because the environment is changing, and COVID really taught us that. I did just a quick calculation, and 6 of our family members that took trains to Chicago now work at home. And if they go back 1 day a week. So those other 4 days when they would have been on the train, they're not on the train anymore. And they will never go back to full-time work in the city ever again. Their companies have been, pretty clear. So I would imagine that you are trying to envision something as best you can, but not really knowing completely how it could look in 20 years.
Well, especially, if there was another pandemic or something, that had an impact that was as great as that, you are correct. And that's where CMAP has done that report of how they're envisioning it moving forward. I think you were involved in that committee, weren't you, in the recovery? The chairman was part of that, as were other county board chairmans, and that is available, I believe, on that CMAP website. That does the best we can at this point in envisioning that.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, thank you so much, Carolyn and Scott, for coming.
Yeah, good to be back.
Okay, next, we have a brief introduction to NACo. You are now.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to spend about 3 minutes talking about the National Association of Counties. I was going to do this presentation at Administrative Services last week, and when we ended up not having a quorum, and I thought this is good stuff we should talk about with the whole board. We have 9 new county board members, and I don't think we've really talked enough about this tool that is the National Association of Counties. There are 3,069 counties or parishes or boroughs in the United States, and over 2,500 of the 3,000 are members of the National Association of Counties. So I just wanted to introduce you to the website. If you haven't checked it out, it's NACo.org. And I really would encourage you, when you got a moment, to browse around. It's a wonderful resource of ideas and information from around the country. What I want you to do, if you would do this, is go to, let's see here, membership here. And if you scroll down to the bottom, I got this right. Here, you can put your email in there. And if you put your email in there and tell them the subjects you're interested in, you get emails all the time from NACo. And it's really nice. You guys, I think you get this paper newsletter in your mailboxes, but you can get that electronically. You can get information on different committees. So take a look at that. I'd also want to show you the events and education section. This, there's the High Performance Leadership Academy. We've sent about 12 staff members through that. It's an online academy. I think Adam, you did that, and you did it. Alicia did it. Carrie Weiss has done it. So we've sent a bunch of staff through there. But then they have the annual conference, which is going to come up in a week and a half, I think, down in Austin. I've gone to that most years. I'm not going to go to this year. I think Chairman is going to go. He's going to have the opportunity to speak with his peers in those Collar counties that we're just talking about, and beginning to prepare us for how we're going to respond to the fiscal cliff for the RTA. There's always the legislative conference in DC every February. We always do that. And then there's just lots of webinars. I'm just scrolling through here. I mean, these are all things that you can be a part of by just signing up and listening in on what they're doing. Pretty neat. I go back to this membership. Come on. There we go. Anyway, this is it's a nice description. They talk about the benefits of being a member. Now, we are a member. Most counties are. But this is a nice description of what the services NACo provides. And you take a look at that. And I wanted to talk about the exec committee. This is what I wanted to show you. Denise Winfrey, she's the current chair of NACo. Every year NACo elects a new chair. And she is county board chairman in Will County. Now, Will County has a different structure where they have a county executive.
Board member.
What's that?
She's a board member.
Yeah, board member, yeah. I don't know if she's chair or not, but she's the chair of NACo right now. Her term will be ending in a couple weeks. And a commissioner from Ramsey County, Minnesota, that's St. Paul, she's going to be stepping in there. I guess the last thing I just want to mention is how NACo relates with ISACO. You know, we do have a good connection with the Illinois State Association of Counties. NACo provides, give or take, $400,000 a year to ISACO in funding to keep that operation going. Every state in the country has an affiliate group. And ISACO is NACo's affiliate. They provide that funding through employee contributions in Nationwide Financial. You know, many of us do put retirement dollars into Nationwide Financial. There's a tiny scrape of that goes to NACo, and then those dollars go back to ISACO. So that's just how it's all interrelated there. Anyways, that's all. I just wanted to encourage you to take a look at the NACo website. If you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Moving on to new business. Do any members have items from next Tuesday's agenda they'd like to remove for discussion? Mr. Reiner.
Thank you. 10A2, the Surya-powered solar plant in Ridgefield.
Ms. Wegner?
16A5, the sheriff's report.
Mr. Hendricks?
10A1, 10A3, 10A4.
Hold on, slow down. 1, 3, and 4?
Yep.
Okay. Is that all for you? Yeah. Okay. Mr. Kearns?
16B25.
Any others? Seeing none. Mr. Hendricks, 10A1. I'm assuming it's 10A1, 3, and 4. Are they the same subject on each?
They are. And this is for Adam. Adam, was there a agriculture mitigation agreement in place for these? So for 10A, and this would be for 10A, 1 through 4.
So 10A1 wouldn't have that, it's a reclassification on that from an A1 to an E3.
Okay.
Yeah, it wouldn't have those. I think the only one that we would have those on would be the solar and the wind energy facilities.
Okay.
So, and for this particular one, we'll investigate that on 10A2.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Mr. Reinert, 10A2.
Yeah, so just a few comments, because I got a lot of calls on this in the last 2 weeks from all of my constituents who live around Crystal Lake and the North Shore, and that are very familiar with the property. And a few things I just wanted everybody to know. It did not go through the watershed committee in Crystal Lake. This came up under the radar of the city council, and these recommendations were made based on their knowledge of that. Also, this land floods quite often, and they've sent me pictures of the land after rains where it's full of water too. And based on that, I would definitely like to make the recommendations that were addressed through Peter Austin. Obviously, the inspection for their drains to make sure that their drain tiles are running and they're not clogged from their insulation of their solar panels, and our fence, and then also the access around that being made of gravel or something that would absorb any rainwater and not stop it worse from that. But quite honestly, if they have passed that pretest for the agriculture, like Mr. Hendricks asked you, Adam, I still would not be able to vote for this. I just can't support this, knowing that everybody in Crystal Lake is against it being in the watershed. Thanks.
Do you want to address those items from the
Sure.
Crystal Lake?
Sure. So we reviewed these, and they certainly came up during the ZBA hearing as well, as those that letter was presented to them, and kind of in aggregate through a staff review and in summarizing some of the responses from the ZBA. So first one is the monitoring wells for the drain tile. Those are in the stormwater management ordinance. The discrepancy is we require them to the extent of the development, and Crystal Lake is asking for them at the property lines. From the staff perspective, we think we can have some discussions with the developer, and it's a pretty reasonable look at. In addition to that, what we would require is any of those drain tiles that are impacted or otherwise jeopardized, they would have to be replaced if they're not in those, if they're impacted by the development or an easement. The next piece on it with the screening, that was reviewed in some detail by the ZBA, and the transcripts will kind of lay that out. There's no real staff position on that. The last one, when we're talking about the Sarah area, that path would have a negative impact for flooding and kind of increase those flooding implications from the staff's perspective. And the ZBA focused on that in large part as well. When we look at the Crystal Lake watershed, it's a very prescriptive, site-specific approach to mitigating water issues. We're on board with those. I guess that's what I would add to those points.
And not to become adversarial on this, but when you build a home, you have to stake out the area where the septic field is going, because just driving a truck or equipment over the land compacts the soil, and it no longer absorbs the rain, it runs off of it. So just them servicing this is going to impact that watershed property. You can no longer put a septic field on land that you've driven on while you're building it for like 2 years, or unless you take it apart and soften it up again so it'll absorb water. So again, not to become adversarial, but just driving on it affects the watershed.
Mr. Kearns.
Okay, so Adam, you said you're going to get back to us on that agriculture.
So, yeah, the one thing I wanted to confirm, we do have it. However, this particular petition predates that law. So what is important through that agricultural impact mitigation agreement doesn't necessarily have the same implications in this application because it's going to go through the traditional conditional use process.
Okay, so any further future solar farms have to have that completed prior to us even having a hearing? I understand we've had a hearing on this one, but future ones, we would not grant a ZBA hearing until that is completed?
That's my understanding, is that's, I don't believe we have a formalized opinion on that, but that's exactly the way it's looking, yes.
Okay. So, back on this, I'm going to change off of that. What is our rules on solar farms on nearness to wells? The approximate distance from a well?
I don't have that off the top. We'll review that and get you an answer through, with environmental health.
Okay, because there are some wells out there on that property, and I think we have to make sure we're not violating that area. And then I would like us on Tuesday to also amend these with the same 3 amendments that we put onto the last solar farms, with the 10 years and the law. So I would like the amendment to come forward also. So that's where I'm going to leave it, because I'd like to see that amendment.
So if you could provide that text as presented last time and have it on our desk so we know what we're voting on.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you. Adam, could you clarify if for some reason this was voted down, can these people come back and reapply, and then they'd be under the jurisdiction of the state law, essentially?
They would, yeah. Since it was voted down, they would have to wait a year to file application. And then at that point, they would be under whatever the current law is.
But they'd have to wait a year?
They would have to wait a year.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Ness?
So, like I'm sure many of my fellow members, I've had significant emails on these issues around solar farms, mostly 2 in the area. And their arguments are well-researched, and it doesn't sound like a not in my backyard issue. But what really, if I remember what Norm said, we can't do anything to help these constituents at this point. If they've been approved under the current law, there's nothing we can do to alleviate the very serious concerns they have about living next door to a solar farm. Is that accurate? I'm trying to find a way to help.
It's a broad question. Let me, I guess, as we go through the processes on these, there's nothing that stops us from, or that gives us the reason or the right to not bring them forward.
But I can still vote no.
We're getting out of planning and development and a little bit more towards state's attorney interpretation.
But as an individual board member, I can not support the petition, correct, Norm? Yeah. I mean,
I think you always have the right to vote your conscience.
I always have the right to vote my conscience.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Ms. Campbell?
Okay, I'm going to lose track of what I was going to ask here. Okay, so Member Reinhardt had mentioned something about flooding and having the pictures. So I did actually listen to the hearing, it's a couple hours. My understanding was that given the, I think there was one discussion about the panels themselves being impervious surface, but obviously that's not the case, and that the amount of additional impervious surface on that property was minimal with regards to flooding. And so my question is, where is that flooding that we're talking about, in the watershed itself or on this particular property? And I think the question really came from Member Reinhardt. So I don't know where you were talking about.
Yeah, the flooding is, there's a depressional area on the south, on the Ridgefield Road side of the property. And certainly then that the connectivity it drains southward towards the rest of the watershed. And then I believe that property collects, I believe it was estimated to be about 16 acres or 20 acres of additional sheet flow from other properties. So it has that impact of additional impervious, and where is that going to go? So that's the study that would have to be reviewed as part of the permit application. Again, as the prescriptive method is laid out in the Crystal Lake watershed.
Okay. And then can you speak to what the requirement is about access roads for fire on other properties, on other solar? Because we don't really, I mean, that is a huge impact in terms of impervious surface on anything, right? So.
Sure. So we've certainly had these conversations going back to 2018 with the various fire districts. We work and integrate work with all 18 fire districts within the county. These fire apparatus access roads are required for any facility, solar farm, new hospital, et cetera. And they're pretty well prescribed in terms of clear area, 20 feet wide, 13 and a half feet of clear height. And then the surface itself is required to accommodate maneuverability. And so that's a broad look at it. But what we do is we discuss that with the respective fire districts, or turn the applicant to go discuss that with the respective fire districts, because they have specification engineers that will tell us, hey, this is what we're going out to look at. So in these instances, solar farms in particular, they're not going to drive a large engine out there. They're going to drive potentially an ambulance or a brush truck or some other mid-sized vehicle. So they've been willing to reduce that to a 14-foot drive lane, 10-foot, 12-foot, whatever it might be, but everyone is site-specific and reviewed by the fire district. They've also been willing to accept grass as the driving surface, and where it's depressional, wet, soggy, mushy, they'll request some improvements to it. But again, they're confident, at least from what we've been told through our contacts at each one of these applications, that they will be able to maneuver what they need around the site with that, without an improved surface like a paved or gravel.
Okay, all right, great, thanks. And I have another couple comments. So to Member Smith's comment that they would be able to reapply under the new legislation if they were denied. They currently are following our more stringent conditions that we have in place already. I know that the AIM report has become, obviously an item of concern. I don't believe in our current process that they have to have applied for it. It doesn't have to have been completed in order to move the process forward, but obviously they don't cite it until it's actually been approved. Am I correct on that?
So, correct. We have been, I think we have 3 of the applications that have come through that had incomplete AMAs. We just did a review of that and verified that the rest of them did furnish AMAs that were either executed, or the other 3 that were not.
So clearly when they're not, they don't go through.
That's what we're looking at this point, correct?
Correct.
That's how we're going to go forward.
That's how we go forward anyway, right? So as long as they've applied for it, we know that they will not be cited unless it's complete and accurate. Correct? Okay, so
Executed,
right.
Completed,
Right.
received from the Department of Ag.
Ag, so they've seen it, that's good, and it comes back and we're good to go. Okay, and so, so we know that we're not going to move forward unless they have that's complete. What was the other thing I was going to say? Because I think the new legislation is that process has to have already occurred before we can approve it. Is that where, I don't feel like we've gotten that final.
Before a hearing is held.
I'm sorry?
Before a hearing is held. The new legislation, under the new rules, would require that it be executed before a hearing is held.
Okay, so I knew we were looking into it, I just didn't know that we had gotten to that point. Okay, and so in listening to the petitioner, it sounded to me like that they were more than willing to accommodate the different things that Crystal Lake had asked for in terms of the watershed, including the drain, hole to see that the drain tiles are working. It's already in our ordinance that they have to repair any damage to drain tiles as they occur. I don't want to have us get into a situation where we're denying these simply because, maybe we don't want it in our backyard or whatever. I mean, part of the reason we want to go forward with at least some of that seem reasonable is that we are trying to get off of fossil fuels. And I was just reading other articles today and yesterday. I mean, you can't open up your phone without hearing articles about the planet warming and getting parts of the world where people are basically going to not be able to live there anymore. It's getting too hot. And so we have to figure out a way to do this. I don't want to be obstructionist about it, and we have to be careful, and all the things that we're talking about are important. But we also have to find ways to move forward with getting us off of fossil fuels so that we can make sure that we protect this planet for our future generations. And I'm not talking about great-grandchildren. I'm talking about my children. So just want to make sure we're keeping that in mind. Thank you.
Mr. Hendricks?
Yeah, and this is a question.
Could you pull your mic to yourself, please?
I apologize. I think this is a question for you, Norm. So if the application predated the new state statute, the state statute doesn't or does apply? That's what I'm confused on at the moment.
Where is he? There you are. If it predates, it doesn't, the new state statute does not apply. You work under your old rules and your old conditions.
Even if those old rules and conditions have been changed since the application at the county level?
Well, what's been changed is the timing for your hearing and timing for the county board to take action. Those were your real substantive changes, trying to fast track that. But you can still put conditions on the petitions that predated.
Okay.
That aren't consistent with that new law.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you. That's just what I was going to clarify, is that the conditions that Mr. Kearns asked for are acceptable because this petition predates the new law. So thank you. Thank you for clarifying that, Norm.
Mr. Shorten?
So going back to the, if we decide to vote this down, and then they are able to come back a year from now, one of the things that we discussed in the last Law and Government Committee meeting was trying to address changes to the law that was passed in Springfield in January. And one of kind of the light bulb moments was when, and she's not here, so, well, she's on the line, so she can confirm if I step in it. But she said in the public meeting, she reached out to the two sponsors in Springfield, in the state Senate and the state legislature, and shared with them the data that you'd provided that showed, I think that this board since 2018 has approved close to 3,300 acres in solar farms. I've been spending a lot of time trying to understand electrification and how it applies to the 2050 zero emission goal that the federal and the state government has set. But the light bulb moment was when Member Altoff shared that information with the sponsors in Springfield. I think I'm quoting her correctly, but their reaction was, oh, because they put forth this bill that applies to all counties in the state without recognizing the fact that we've been very ahead of the game on this matter. Now, I have a difference of opinion when it comes to solar and wind, but that's a different discussion for a different day. So I'm going to vote no on this issue, and with the anticipation that within a year there's going to be one, if not two, legislative sessions. There may be changes in the state law that might return some of the authority that we had before to the McHenry County Board. So.
Last one, Ms. Campbell.
Okay, so I just want to make the point again is that this is going under our own conditions, and you're absolutely right. We talked about the fact that in law and government that this county does very well in terms of approving solar. Like you said, over 30 have been approved. The thought is that, like, a number of them probably won't ever get cited, just for whatever reasons, but we are very good about approving them. Even if we go back to the legislature and they come back and say, okay, yeah, you're right, we agree with a lot of your conditions. The conditions we have in place right now are regarding setbacks, which are more stringent than the ones that they've changed at the state level. Even if we get them to agree to tightening up some of the restrictions that they have loosened with this legislation, there's no guarantee we're going to go back to what we have right now. The bonding on this is 150%. The legislature is asking for 100%. Even in law and government, we agreed we wouldn't get 150% again. This thing is already under the stringent rules that we've had in place for every single one of these things. We have no guarantee that we would be able to keep this going forward, regardless of what improvements we get in the legislation. So that would be my concern. And we already know that if they can't meet some of these other conditions that have come on with the watershed, it's not going forward anyway. So that would just be something to keep in mind as we think about approving or not approving. This one is under the way we used to do it, and we've done over 30 of them that way. So thank you.
Thank you. Next item, Ms. Wegner, 16A5.
Thank you. I had some questions, two specifically. The first one is under Patrol Division. There are 3 fields under the 2023 that are not filled. So just wondered if there was a reason why those don't have numbers in them?
Yes, thank you. So at the end of June, ETSB did an upgrade to a software program that affected all law enforcement in this county. For the most part, it went smooth, but there were a couple kinks in it, and a couple of those kinks affected these areas where we're not able to get in the system and draw this information out. So it just affected, in this report, those areas. So we expect next month to be able to have the same comparison. We're just waiting for some of those kinks in the system to be worked out.
Okay. And the other question then too is, if you look under, of course now I can't see, on the Communications Division where it says Sheriff's Incidents Dispatched and Contracted Police Incidents Dispatched.
Yes.
There seems to be like a reversal. So there's a reduction of sheriffs, but an increase in contracted police. Wondering if that has to do with working with other municipalities, because it seems some of them are about a 25% difference.
I'll have to get back to you on that. We're still working and contracting with the same number of fire and police agencies. So I apologize. I'll have to get the contracted. In my eyes, doesn't seem like that big of a difference.
I just saw
in the fire, but in the police because of the quantity.
Right. I just saw a difference and wondered if maybe they were related. That was it.
I don't know if we're going to be able to give you a good reason, but I'll look into that and get back to you.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kern, 16B25.
Yes, okay, you're here. Okay, what I wanted to ask is I have a couple different questions here. The first one is this is a budget line item transfer for unused funds to move over to client services. Do you anticipate any more of these in the future before the end of this fiscal year budget, or is this the only one?
Our budget year, that's a very good question, and thank you. Our budget year obviously goes the same as yours, the November 30th. At this point, we have no more unallocated dollars to client services to give. So if there's further requests that come in, for example, I know an agency provider did contact me saying that they wanted to put in a request to our board for further client service dollars that they've run out of, then yes, we'll be coming back to the board. But again, this is in due diligence. We are always looking at our budget to see if to avoid fund balance coming at the end of the year, to see if we can move these dollars into client services. So we're going to continue to do this. So yes, the answer is yes, you may see us in the future with further resolutions as we try to avoid dollars going into fund balance and being used for our providers that are needing it.
So you're trying to spend down any money that you possibly could use for next year's budget because you're asking for a $2.5 million. Your board voted to increase their budget by $2.5 million next year. So you're spending down the fund balance so that
No,
you
no,
can't
the way,
use
the
that
way,
next year?
No, let me explain how it works. Any dollars that get unutilized this year go into our fund balance, which we can't use next year. We wouldn't be able to use it until 2025. So again, we're trying to avoid dollars, as everyone probably wants to, avoid dollars going into their reserves and really being able to utilize it for providers that are in need. So that's what we're currently doing. So yes, there's continued requests that our current budget, again, we're looking for efficiencies in our current budget so that we're reducing the amount of fund balance that comes back.
Okay, so the $114,000, has your board already voted to allocate that fund?
Yes, they have.
And what did they allocate that to?
I believe the last organization that came to us was Home of the Sparrow, and it was for case management for the homeless population. And so these dollars will be part of the dollars that are being allocated to them.
Okay, and so this has nothing to do with the building project that the one group purchased for $500,000. This isn't part of that? You approved
That was
a couple months
in
ago.
May. Yeah, and again, I would have to look at exactly where all the dollars, but that was approved in May for the capital project, and it was $250. So that was, again, we had unallocated dollars. There have been many requests that have come to us, so again, I'm not sure. This is just part of the client service pot that we are needing to fill the client service needs.
So this isn't going toward that $500,000 school building that they purchased? That was purchased on auction in June?
I would have to get back to you exactly where these dollars are being allocated, but I believe that these dollars were for the Home of the Sparrow.
Okay, and that's okay, because I'm against us mental health board, and I don't know our policy, the policy in the mental health board, and maybe that's the policy, that we participate in purchasing buildings for organizations. I don't think we should be doing that, and I think that the funds, the $500,000, for example, could provide a lot of funds, a lot of services to a lot of people instead of one group giving them a building. And I just think that I don't want to see this used for that.
And I would love, and again, those are great questions, and I know we're setting up time to meet, and I can go through that with you individually and explain our policies and procedures with you.
I'd almost like that discussed in a committee or a group, not one-on-one. I think our board needs to understand the policies of the mental health board. When we have this future budget battle coming up for $2.5 million, I don't know how we do this. We'd like to know where this money gets spent and allocated. And sometimes we just got to say, no, we don't have the money for some groups. And
Right.
I'm not saying to say no on this one. I'm just saying, sometimes we have to say
and we
no.
do. And we
say,
do.
And just like the, just like the Senior Grant Service Commission, they don't get enough money for all the requests that they have. And we'd love to give it to them.
Right.
And love to have that. But the problem is, we don't have the funds and not going to have the funds.
Right.
So just want us to be aware of that, so.
And we do say no. The board does say no on some of the requests that come through. And, if we're unable to meet further client requests for this fiscal year, we will be saying no. So if we're not able to do what we've done here, because, there will be a time limit that we won't be able to, as the year goes down, to come back to this board and do a resolution. So as it gets closer to the end of the year, we will be saying no to further requests that are coming through for this fiscal year.
Can you for sure say that this, by Tuesday night, that this 114,000 is not allocated to that building project?
I can, by Tuesday night, yes, I can
Okay.
definitely tell you by Tuesday night.
I just want to know.
I mean, I can tell you in the next hour. I just don't have that.
That would be great.
I don't have that in my
That would be great.
fingertips.
That would be great. Thank you.
Pardon? Okay.
Do you know how much in excess administrative budget you would have after this money is allocated?
We're continuing to evaluate. At this point, these were
An
from.
estimate?
I don't have an estimate, no.
Could you provide that to us?
Sure. We're continuing to evaluate. I don't think there'll be a lot from our administrative expense items. We're also looking at if there's any other underutilized, client services that we can also pull back.
Okay, thank you.
To give to others who are needing it.
Ms. Wagner?
Thank you. A couple things. First, could you clarify, you said that if there is unutilized funds and they go into the fund balance, that you can't use them till 2025. Is that a law or policy? How does that work?
Well, Pete can probably explain that better, but that's a policy that we follow at the Mental Health Board.
Is that a mental health board policy or is that a county policy?
We were told it was a county policy.
Okay.
I'm trying to follow, I guess if, what I'm understanding is that the mental health board is taking fund reserves and then appropriating it into their operating budget the following year. So, I don't, if there was dollars that went unused, in fiscal '23, one would think that you could appropriate them to be used in fiscal '24. Their timing is different. If they get dollars in fiscal '24, they'll have a call for services in June, thereabouts, and then they're not utilized until perhaps '25. Is that maybe how the timing is lining up?
It lines up, the fiscal year lines up the same, though. I mean, the application process is in June through July.
Right. Well, Leonette, I'm trying to unravel what you said there. So
Yeah. Sure.
If you're saying it can't be used till '25, that timing would make sense. Dollars not used this year get appropriated and in '24 awarded, or call for projects in June of '24 awarded later in the summer of '24, used in '25.
Okay. All right. So it's all a timing thing and to make sure that they're not utilized in that fiscal year. All right. And I know this is something that we really need to talk about with the mental health crisis, especially with the pandemic, and then we're talking about senior services, veterans, overdose, and so there's so many facets to this. I echo what Member Kern said. If we could allow them to have a presentation at one of our board meetings or a COW meeting to talk about what they do, maybe how their financials work, and how they work with the excess money that is not utilized, or is that something possible that we could have them do?
Sure, we've discussed that already. I think we're talking about a future presentation at PHCS to start, and also as the budget process starts to unfold, would be more appropriate to bring it back a little bit later as the budget process goes
Leonetta
forward.
will be presenting her budget to PHCS next round.
Okay, I'm not talking just budget, though, I'm talking about
appreciate
how
that.
it all works, because, yeah, sorry.
A month from today, Carrie Wise and I will be kind of doing an update as to where we are in the fiscal '24 budget and that development and the challenges they're in. Certainly, one of the things we're all talking about is the Mental Health Board's request to increase their levy by $2.5 million. And we will talk about how that fits into the larger picture and the challenge that presents. So out of there, perhaps we could have Leonetta take the mic and talk a little bit about how that would work for them and how their dollars flow.
All right, I'm actually requesting a formal presentation. We allow the Conservation District to do it when they present their budget. And since the Mental Health Board's budget is in our budget as a whole, I think we should have more information when we talk about it, especially if we're talking about what we're going to fund and what we're not going to fund. Thank you.
Mr. Smith.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to comment on Mr. Reinert's concerns. I'm quite sure that purchase from the Home of the Sparrow came through the Community Development Housing Grant Commission. And if not the entire amount, certainly the bulk of it was a grant from that. I think it was the entire amount. Maybe staff could review that and include that in that email that they're going to send out regarding these questions. Maybe staff is reviewing it right now. Okay. But I'm quite certain that's where the money come from. Thank you.
Ms. Ness?
So, Leo, I'm curious, the $114,000, were those unused dollars that were returned as a result of inability to meet the contract, correct? Those are direct services to clients?
No. This 114,000, again, this is just a regular part of the process that a lot of county departments do, is reallocate some dollars that might not be utilized. So, for example, this is from our administrative budget.
Okay.
So there were, two of them were related to positions. One was, positions that were not filled at the Mental Health Board until recently, our compliance position, and then the IT position that we had was unfilled for a majority of the year. So it was mainly the two positions, and then we also had administratively our speaker project and our camera project came in under budget, so we were able to pull dollars there as well.
And so you're going to return those to agencies?
We're going to, yes, those dollars are going to the clients who are needing the dollars.
Okay, so as a result of really managing that administrative budget, you're able to return some money back to direct service to clients?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
That's what's happening.
Mr. Hendricks.
And you might have answered at least one of my questions with your response to Board Member Ness, but the compliance analyst and IT support positions that were unfilled that created this $114,000, I guess, surplus, are those positions filled now?
Yes, those positions are filled now.
Both of them are filled now?
Yes.
And then you mentioned something that any unspent funds go into a 2-year delay into your reserve fund, so 2023 would go to 2025. Does the Mental Health Board have any reserve funds from 2021 that are being spent in 2023, or vice versa, 2022 that's going to be in your reserve fund for 2024?
Yes, part of the operating budget for the Mental Health Board today was using some of the fund balance, and there's 900 in fiscal year 23 that is part of our operating budget, and that's what I always talked about, that's not sustainable, because we will not have a fund balance. We won't always have a fund balance to draw on, but for the last 4 or 5 years, the Mental Health Board has used those dollars as part of their operating budget. And again, we may not have it. We do have some dollars left that we may be coming to this board if we continue to have high volume client needs that are coming before us. So we may be coming before the board to ask for the release of some of the fund balance if our board approves any further requests. And we can't find it within the budget like we have now.
And then my last question anyway, for 2024, do you know what the rough sum of that reserve balance is looking at, fiscal year 2024?
Fiscal year 2024, so
the 2022 excess balance, I guess, if any, what's the reserve balance going to look like in 2024? Do you have a rough approximation?
no, I don't.
Okay.
I don't at this point. And just keep in mind with the fund balance, part of our policy is that we need to have a 5-month reserve. So, our operating, expenses going out to clients is probably about $1 million, close to $1 million a month. So we need to at least have about $5 million in reserve. That's part of the county policy. So that is something that we can't touch because that's just part of the county policy. So we have to have $5 million always approximately in our reserve that we can't touch.
Okay, and you have currently approximately
7
million in excess?
Well,
Or reserve
I'm not even
funding?
sure it's even that much. I'm sorry, I don't have that information.
That's fine,
Yeah.
between 5 and 7 million though? I mean, I
Yes,
assume it
yes,
has to be 5.
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Ms. Greeno?
So with this amount going to Home of the Sparrow for case management for the homeless, what is the entire budget for Home of the Sparrow?
I don't have that in front of me.
What percentage of their budget is funded by the Mental Health Board?
Not that much.
Well, roughly 15,
I don't,
25,
I'm
35,
sorry, I don't have that in
55,
front of me either.
65.
I don't have that in front
Is
of me,
there
but I do have an Excel file.
Any kind of a standard that you use for the organizations that you donate money to? I mean, these are not taxing bodies,
Right.
that we're supporting. We're supplementing
Right.
independent nonprofit organizations that are serving the community at the request of the community. And so $114,000 in any nonprofit budget is pretty significant.
Oh, absolutely.
And yes, it is. I serve on several nonprofit boards.
Yes, so just to tell you in general, because I don't have that information right in front of me at my fingertips, but in general, we don't support 100% of our provider agencies. The largest percentage is 65%, and the smallest are 1% to 2%. So most of the agencies, we fund definitely have other mechanisms of funding streams. So what happens is when they come to the Mental Health Board, they're usually dollars that are not billable to other agencies. They're usually dollars for programs that are innovative or things like homeless population, or in Harvard where there is a migrant population, where there's a bilingual program. So they're very specific programs that can't get funded anywhere else. And that's where the dollars come to the Mental Health Board. But there's not any agencies that we fund at 100%.
Did someone say 100%?
No,
I was just,
no.
Okay, I was wondering where that came from.
I just wanted just to make that clear.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Kearns?
I just wanted to clarify if anyone misunderstood me. I'm not opposed to funding Home of the Sparrow here. So I wanted to make that very clear. And I think they are a good organization and worthwhile, so.
Ms. Campbell?
So I think that's a good point about the percentage of funding, and so I'm really looking forward to having a conversation and presentation by the Mental Health Board on this type of thing. I have, for Home of the Sparrow, it looks like the Mental Health Board funds about 4.3% of their total budget. So it's about $273,000 was approved in funding. Their total budget is over $6 million. So it looks like the vast majority of the ones that are funded by the Mental Health Board, are a pretty low percentage of their total budget. There's a few smaller agencies, it looks like Youth and Family Center, where their budget is small to begin with, and so that percentage funded from the Mental Health Board gets bigger. But it'll be good to include that as well, because that's an interesting piece of information to know. Sure. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, no further items removed. Pete, you got a report for us today?
Yes, sir. Got a couple of things here. Several things, actually, but I'll be quick. I think most of you know Lori Crane left the employ of the Substance Abuse Coalition earlier this year, and that position, that funded position, was a grant-funded position that was about to wind down anyways at the end of September. Kind of working with Leonetta, Jason Sturworth, who now works for the city of McHenry, but he's the chair of Substance Abuse Coalition, and Melissa, we're kind of repackaging a position to kind of staff that group, at least on a part-time basis out of the health department. So we'll be bringing that resolution through next month to kind of get that up and going. Another note, the coroner's office, which has been unionized for the last decade or so, the members have voted to decertify. That's not final yet. We need to hear back from the union, but the membership has expressed their desire to decertify. You heard a lot from Scott Hennings earlier today, but I'm sorry he's not here. But Scott and his transportation planning staff did earn a $4.9 million grant to connect the Prairie Path bike trail over to the Moraine Valley State Park along Bull Valley Road. It's a real win for us. This is a kind of project we wouldn't do but for the grant, but it's really going to help our pedestrian population and biking population, because it's an area people want to travel a lot, but they're doing it on Bull Valley, and this will make it a lot safer. Cheryl and I are going to host 4 employee forums next week, kind of following up on the employee survey that we did earlier this spring, where we had such good response. So we're going to kind of be meeting with employees on a voluntary basis next week at four different meetings, one at DOT, one at Valley High, and then one at the courthouse and one here, just kind of talking about what we heard and what we're going to be moving on next. So we talked about the RTA and the fiscal cliff. I was part of the 5 county meetings with myself and Joe Kopolsky and Scott Hennings and our counterparts at the other 4 callers. We met last Friday, we met yesterday, and we're going to meet again tomorrow morning, and just kind of again preparing the 5 Collar County chairmen, for what we feel like is, things we can live with, things we can't live with. If we're going to increase X, then we should get Y, those kind of a statement. So we'll be working on that and getting that information to the chairman shortly. At Administrative Services, next round, we will be looking at the county board budget. In that budget document, we always have to have county board goals. So we'll be sending out an email to you today, tomorrow, just kind of planting the seeds. What are some board goals that you'd like to see for next year? And we can come up with those, and that, I've got plenty of ideas, but I'd love to see some of your ideas of what you would like to get accomplished as a county board. So we'll send an email out, and if you could respond, that'd be great. We'll get those into the county budget for fiscal '24. Some of you older board members or board members from the previous board, we had a difficult time with the Regional Office of Education and their finances, and we kind of assumed control of their finances through our finance division for a period of time, and we've severed those ties now. We've finished the audit for fiscal '22. That was kind of the last thing. Carrie still remains in contact with Diana Hartman, and we help as needed, but really that formal connection of us kind of being the accountant, if you will, for ROE, that has been finished. A couple more things, I'm going slow here. When we talk about Metro service to Huntley and Rockford, there's a distinction there that it's not commuter rail. It's really passenger rail. And it's really not Metro providing that service in the sense, it's Metro staff and Metro equipment, but it's IDOT that is paying for that. And it's the Illinois Department of Transportation is paying for that. So when we talk about all of this stress with RTA funding, this isn't really adding to it. It's IDOT that's paying for this. So I just want to have that in the back of your mind as we're talking about where we're going with rail service to Rockford and Huntley and where we're going with RTA funding. It's IDOT that is contracting with Metro to provide that passenger rail service, not commuter rail service. I guess the last thing I'll mention, just again, congratulations to our finance division because they won the triple crown of GFOA awards. Again, we sent out that press release, but we are only, there's over 3,000 counties, and how many cities I don't even know. But there's only 300 local governments in the country that earned that triple crown award for the best budget document, the PAFR, the public finance report, and the consolidated annual finance report. So congratulations to finance for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Leonetta, did you have a?
Yes,
Thank you. I do have an update regarding the question. So what we have here is, so far, I just want to let you know that altogether, the way it works is when we fund our providers, they get their dollars December 1 from what the board approves of, from their funding applications. Throughout the year then, if more dollars are needed, they can come back to the mental health board to request those dollars. Thus far, since December 1, we've had $995,600 requested additionally from our providers. From that, $643,600 have been approved by our board. And your question was, the 114, what was it a part of? 17,000 will support part of the request of Home of the Sparrow, and the rest is actually going to be used for future funds. So I was mistaken. I thought we were done with future funds, that we wouldn't have anything to offer, but it looks like the rest of these dollars will be available for future requests, which is great.
Okay. Thank you. With that, no need for executive session. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Scala, seconded by Mr. Shorten. All in favor say aye. Against? Have a good day.